Hello and welcome. It's 10 a.m. on Monday, the 29th of September. You're tuned in to our mid-morning newscast here on ARIRANG TV. It's great to have you with us. I'm Mark Broome. Let's take a look at what's making the headlines. The interim chief of Korea's main opposition party proposes talks with his ruling party counterpart to discuss ways to normalize the National Assembly that's been paralyzed for months over a bill regarding an investigation into the Sewol-ho ferry disaster. Under a toughened special law effective from this Monday, child abusers in Korea will face much harsher punishments than before, and victims will receive greater protection. Plus, fresh clashes are engulfing Hong Kong as pro-democracy protests spread. Demonstrators are furious with the Chinese government's decision to restrict democratic reforms in the city. We start here in Korea, with just one day remaining before lawmakers should head back to the National Assembly for the start of a plenary session. The main opposition party has proposed holding a separate meeting before it to discuss the highly contentious Sewol-ho ferry bill that has crippled parliamentary activity for months now. The interim chief of the New Politics Alliance for Democracy, Moon Hee-sang, proposed bipartisan talks with his ruling Saenuri Party counterpart Kim Moo-sung on Sunday. This in the hope both sides could get Parliament normalised by Wednesday, October 1st. The ruling party is yet to give a clear answer to this proposal, criticising the opposition party for putting too much focus on the Sewol-ho ferry bill that's meant to investigate April's disaster. The ruling party want assurances from the opposition that they'll be attending Tuesday's plenary session. An earlier plenary session last Friday had to be adjourned because the NPAD didn't show up. Now, people found guilty of child abuse will face much stricter punishment under reinforced laws that come into effect on this Monday. Under the new law, a parent who physically harms their child could now face up to life in prison and have their parental rights terminated, at least for a few months, meaning they will not be allowed any contact with their child in that period. On top of this, those who ignore a suspected case of abuse and do not report such cases, like neighbours or child care centres, can now be fined up to 5 million won, that's roughly $4,800. The toughened law was proposed earlier this year amid great public outrage after two women, in two separate cases in fact, were found guilty of beating their stepdaughters to death and were handed prison sentences of just 15 and 10 years. Now, North Korea's foreign minister claims his country's nuclear weapons program was developed as a response to Washington's hostile and stifling strategy against the North. The minister was making Pyongyang's case during a very rare speech at the UN General Assembly in New York. Kim Hyun-bin reports.
North Korean Foreign Minister Lee Soo-young used his speech to the UN General Assembly on Saturday to shift the blame away from his regime and onto the United States for the issues that has it at odds with the international community. Over North Korea's nuclear program, he said his regime would disarm only once the U.S. changes its policy toward the North.
The nuclear issue can be resolved only if and when the threat to our sovereignty and our right to life is removed, which requires the United States to end its hostile policy toward the DPRK.
Over the North's abysmal human rights record, Lee said the regime is willing to talk. He said the North expressed a desire to take part last week in an unprecedented high-level meeting on the issue, which was hosted by the U.S., but the U.S. rejected the request.
The DPRK is willing to engage in dialogue on the human rights issue. We are willing to cooperate, but it has to be on equal footing with other countries that are not hostile to us.
During a 20-minute meeting with UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon on the sidelines, Lee handed over a handwritten letter from North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. The United Nations did not give out any details about what was said. But after receiving it, Ban asked the North for permission and support, and having UN organizations help out the North Korean people. Kim Hyun-bin, ARIRANG News.
President Park Geunhye says sending out messages that show the international community is interested in North Korea's human rights issues will contribute to improving the way of life for ordinary North Koreans in that country. The presidential office said on Sunday that President Park evaluated that the Commission of Inquiry by the UN Human Rights Council to investigate into human rights violations in North Korea is doing a great job spreading awareness of this very serious issue. She also said reunification is the key solution to all problems connected to the North, including its nuclear weapons program. Now, the current diplomatic friction between Northeast Asian players, namely Korea, China and Japan, is further complicating the resumption of the six-party talks that are meant to denuclearize North Korea. This is according to Kurt Campbell, who served as US Assistant Secretary of State for East Asian and Pacific Affairs from 2009 to 2013. Now, Hwang Sang-hee sat down with him for a chat.
In the past, the biggest problem six-party was just to get North Korea to come to the table. But now we have a whole host of very difficult bilateral issues in Asia that might complicate getting back to the table. So as a result, I think we've got to be open to other frameworks and other discussions. At the heart of that, in my view, is a recognition that the driving force behind diplomacy with North Korea increasingly has to be South Korea. I think given South Korea's increasing stature, its remarkable performance, it is only right that they take a leading role in the politics and diplomacy around the status of its own peninsula.
Do you think a new momentum can be found through a bigger role by China?
I'm one of those people that believe that the key subtly and strategically to unlocking some of the problems on the Korean Peninsula is an improving relationship between South Korea and China. And in fact, if anything, the country that has undermined China's security, has created real problems for Beijing, is not the United States, but their dear friends North Korea. And I think they're coming to recognize that. And the more that South Korea and China work together, the more likely it is that China will risk putting more pressure on North Korea because they know they have a country that they can work with in South Korea.
Wouldn't a strong South Korea-China ties hurt the trilateral relationship between the United States, South Korea, and Japan?
I think it's a good thing that China and South Korea are working more closely together. I am hurt and saddened by what's going on between Japan and South Korea, and I'd like very much to see steps being taken on both sides to improve the relationship. And I know how difficult it is, and I also am of the view that the United States could do more to help that process along. So I think what we want are improving constellation, a web of bilateral relations. I think that will help us in Asia.
There are criticisms that Washington's strategic patience policy on North Korea has led to a bigger, more developed North Korean nuclear program. What's your take on that?
We've done everything we can to pose to North Korea that it faces a fundamental choice. It can have better relations with the West, more integration, more economic support, or it can live as exile and outcast as a nuclear state. Choose one of the two. But I think we've learned, at least from most of our experience, that North Korea does not want to relinquish its nuclear weapons. And that's fundamentally at odds with our strategic diplomacy.
Thank you for your time today.
Thank you. It's my honor. Thank you very much.
That was our Hwang Sang-hee sitting down there with Kurt Campbell, former US Secretary of State for East Asian Affairs. Now, in economic news, Korea posted a current account surplus for the 30th straight month in August, but the margin was down from the previous month. The Bank of Korea says the surplus, which is the broadest measure of cross-border trade, amounted to $7.27 billion US dollars compared to the over $7.8 billion recorded in July. Including August, Korea's current account surplus during the year has totaled more than $54.3 billion. The central bank forecasts the surplus for the entire year of 2014 to be around 84 billion. Now, there are increasingly loud calls for an end to overly excessive executive pay packages here in Korea, including to those people whose management skills have been called into question. The heads of Korea's largest banking groups are taking home much larger paychecks and bigger bonuses than their counterparts in many other advanced nations, and this includes Japan and the US, who oversee much larger and more profitable operations. Our Son Jung-in reports.
Ousted chief of KB Financial Lee Myung-nok, who was dismissed after being suspended over a series of mismanagement charges, received nearly $600,000 in salary during the first half of this year. Im's salary may seem high for some, but it pales in comparison to the heads of other local banking groups. According to data from January to June period this year, Citibank Korea CEO Ha Young-gu was paid $2.3 million, while Hana Financial Group chairman Kim Geunhye received more than $1.2 million. The figure was similar last year, with top banking groups' chief executives taking home bumper bonuses and stock shares on top of their basic salary. Market watchers claim their paychecks are too high. The average pay for financial CEOs in Japan is around $1 million, roughly a third of what their Korean counterparts receive. But Japan's banks' combined net profits are nearly 10 times higher than those in Korea. Korean banks are also known to pay their CEOs more than those in the US, even higher than Bank of America, which is the fourth biggest bank in the world. Data shows that banks in Japan and the US earn half of their profits doing business overseas. The same figure is under 10% for banks in Korea. Local banks have come under criticism for lining their pockets, while society's most vulnerable struggle to pay off high-interest loans. 손정인, 아리랑 뉴스.
Said that a team of South Korean...
Get connected to Korea and the world. Join us every weekday for the latest developments out of Korea, Asia, and beyond. On air, on your mobile, and online, we lead the way every day. ARIRANG News.
To try and resolve the crisis in Ukraine, the European Union also offers €15 billion. Now, a very busy weekend and a busy Monday morning on the global news front, starting with the ongoing pro-democracy protests that are brewing very heavily in Hong Kong. For more on this story and others, we connect to our Eunice Kim, standing by at the news centre for us. Good morning, Eunice.
Good morning, Mark.
So it's supposed to be the start of a work week in Hong Kong as well, but it's turning out to be one that's not going to be business as usual.
Indeed, and that's because thousands of mostly student pro-democracy protesters remain occupying major thoroughfares, leading to what would be a bustling business district. Now, the crowd has receded somewhat, but as late as early this morning, the unprecedented sit-ins had peaked into escalated violence, with riot police lobbing tear gas and pepper spray at the crowds, an uncommon sight in a city that is not a stranger to protests. The student protesters had been demonstrating for about a week when they were joined by the Occupy Central movement on Sunday, and they are collectively demanding universal suffrage in the city's first chief executive election slated for 2017. They want to be allowed by Beijing to select their own candidate as opposed to those preordained by a nominating committee. The Hong Kong Information Services Department said at least 34 people were injured and hospitalized on Sunday, among them police officers. Kurdish forces are continuing to press against Islamic State extremists, pushing back for control of a key border town in Syria. Syrian Kurds say Saturday's U.S.-led coalition airstrikes did not break IS's resolve to take over Kobani, and that they fear a massacre if the militants prove to be successful. Kobani had been under attack for more than a week and sent some 14,000 people fleeing across Turkey's border. The U.S. Central Command said coalition airstrikes had also hit 4 IS-held makeshift oil refineries in Syria on Saturday, as well as a command center. Now, in Japan, at least 31 people are feared dead after the country's second highest volcano erupted on Saturday. Their lifeless bodies were recovered at the foot of Mount Ontake that erupted unexpectedly, covering neighboring areas with ash and rocks. Some 250 people were stranded on the slopes, most of them who made it down safely Saturday night. Search and rescue teams are back scaling the peak this morning to locate the 45 climbers still missing. Mount Ontake is located 200 kilometers west of Tokyo on the border of Nagano and Gifu prefectures, and its last major eruption was 35 years ago in 1979. At the United Nations General Assembly in New York, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov took a jab at the United States, saying the country could not change its so-called Cold War genetic code, while adding that it must give up its claims of, quote, eternal uniqueness. He also said that the Ukraine crisis was a result of a coup backed by the U.S. and the EU, intent on pushing the country onto their side. On Russia's annexation of the Crimea earlier this year, Lavrov said it was a choice made by the majority Russian-speaking population there.
Now, there are a growing number of people who think that wearables could be the next evolution in mobile technology, eventually knocking the smartphone off its perch. Sales of smart watches, glasses and fitness bands are expected to top $3 billion this year and eventually reach $50 billion by the year 2030. Our Connie Kim has this week's Industry Insight.
With many believing that the smartphone market is already reaching maturity, there's a new kid on the block, wearables. Currently in its infancy stage, the market value of wearables is forecast to more than double over the next 4 years. So what can consumers expect next? Take a look. Leave your smartphone in your pocket, and with a smartwatch on your wrist alone, you can make calls, send emails, monitor your health, and stay fit. That's what the future holds for us. That's if wearables really take off. It started with Google Glass. With a voice command, the miniature computer in the upper right corner vision will take pictures, record video and audio, and search for a location. Samsung, wanting to get out in front of Apple, came out with Galaxy Gear, although pretty prematurely, many would say. And the highly anticipated Apple Watch and LG G Watch R were unveiled earlier this month. But the question is, would you wear it every day? It may be fun to show off to your friends for a day or two, but it's currently a hard sell to non-techies. And that's where the fashion industry comes in. Google's partnered up with designer Diane von Furstenberg to offer a set of stylish frames and clip-on shades. Apple is working with Burberry and high-end watchmaker Tag Heuer in a move to go stylish. But fashion is only the start. The short battery life of wearables is another factor that could turn off consumers.
In order to become part of our daily lives, the battery life needs to be extended. Battery technology is currently catered to the auto industry. Bendable, flexible, and stretchable batteries that can fit into wearables need to be developed.
The small display screens are another issue in a world where size does matter. The solution may come in the form of holograms or virtual displays controlled by voice command.
Our interface will increasingly be voice as opposed to text, largely because you can speak to a wearable device and not be limited by the size of the keyboard. So that really is the future, I think.
From smartphones to now smartwatches and glasses, the technology is poised to be all around us in the near future, whether through smart homes, smart cars, or even smart shoes. Connie Kim, ARIRANG News.
And a good Monday morning to you all as we continue on with our 2014 Incheon Asian Games coverage, starting off with baseball. Now, Japan was able to beat China in the fourth place game to win a bronze medal, but the big game was the final between South Korea and Chinese Taipei. Now the two teams facing off for the second straight Asian Games finals, but the Korean national team having a hard time with their offense as Chinese Taipei takes a 3-2 lead going into the 8th inning. But Korea rallies back on a bases-loaded hit by pitch from Kang Jeong-ho to tie the game, followed by Na Sung-bum, who grounds into an RBI groundout to give Korea the slim 4-3 lead. But it's Lotte Giants' Hwang Jae-gyun who seals the deal with a clutch 2-run single as Korea holds on to win 6-3, winning their second straight Asian Games gold. Now, golf is another sport where the Koreans were expected to win a couple of gold medals in, but it was a lot tougher than everyone thought. Now, first off, over on the men's side, Kim Nam-hoon would finish off with an individual silver after shooting a 15 under par overall and losing to Chinese Taipei's Pan Cheng-sung. Now, the men's team would also finish with a silver medal as well, losing to Chinese Taipei once again as Korea fails to win a single gold in golf for the first time in 12 years. Meanwhile, over on the women's side, a shocking silver medal finish for the South Korean women's team, losing to Thailand by 7 strokes. But it was Park Yeol who came out on top with the only gold medal as she won the women's individual gold after shooting 19 under par after 4 rounds of play. Now, South Korea was able to win surprise gold medals in sports like women's single sculls event or men's wushu. But how about this event, road race cycling, as Chang Kyung-gu claimed the top podium spot on Sunday. Now, competing among 48 racers from 26 nations, Chang Kyung-gu finishes the 13 laps of the 14-kilometer track for a total of 182 kilometers in first place after finishing with a final time of 4 hours, 7 minutes and 52 seconds. That's the first gold in the event for Korea since the 2002 Busan Asian Games, as Park Sung-baek was disqualified for interference back in 2010 despite finishing first. And now shifting over to men's badminton doubles, where world #1 duo of Lee Yong-dae and Yoo Yeon-sung faced off against the Indonesian team of Mohammad Hassan and Hendra Setiawan in the finals. And despite the South Korean duos being the favorites going into this match, the Indonesian pair shocks everyone as they rally back 16-21, 21-16, and 21-17, taking the match 2-1 for the gold medal. With the silver medal finish, Korea fails to win their first men's double gold in 12 years. And now finishing things off, South Korea was able to win several gold medals on Sunday, including 3 gold medals in archery and gold medal in women's 3-person bowling as well. But China did hit the century mark in the gold medal count. So before I say goodbye, let's take a look at the medal count so far at the Incheon Asian Games. And I'll see you guys again for your sports needs.
Good morning. It's raining right now in the central parts of the nation, including here in the capital, but soon the whole nation will see light showers falling. And the total precipitation is expected to be somewhere between 5 to 70 millimeters across the nation. But showers will go away from the upper regions from late afternoon, so it will be a rainy and cloudy Monday today, and the top temperatures are expected to be about 3 to 6 degrees lower than yesterday. So let's take a closer look at those temperatures. Now, the high in Seoul and Daegu will only make it to 22 and 23, while Gwangju and Busan will hike up to 24 and 25 respectively. Now, for other regions, it looks like down on Jeju Island and Daejeon will peak at 26 and 23, and Dokdo-shu see highs of 22 this this afternoon. And weather in Incheon, where the Asian Games are in full swing, will also have a rainy and cloudy day today. About 10 millimeters of precipitation is expected till this noon. And it seems like we have another round of rain in store at the end of the week. Then the top temperatures will be a lot cooler than what we've been having these days, feeling more like mid-autumn. Now that's all for Korea, and here's international weather for viewers around the world.
Well, that's all we have for now. We'll be back again with another newscast at noon Korea time in about 90 minutes. Until then, goodbye.